All right, welcome back, everybody. We have another professional in our Parks and Recreation professional interview series. Today we have Christian Moore with us. How are you doing, Christian?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Well, number one, thank you for joining us and agreeing to do this and taking your time. I sure appreciate it. I know you and I have known each other a while, and I know a little bit more about you. But give us tell us where you're at, what your title is, and tell me something you do for fun.
Sure. So for the last 3.5, almost 4 years now, I have had the opportunity to serve as executive director of DeMolay International, which is a worldwide mentoring organization for young men ages 9 to 21. Prior to that, I was actually started in state government, did some time in city government, did church recreation and retreat ministry before coming to DeMolay as well. Uh, Fun for me has been a little weird this year with COVID and everything going on. I love to travel. I love to be at sporting events, especially collegiate football and baseball. So that's been a little hard this year, but we're looking forward to seeing that come back and actually have some trips planned later in the year where work might coincide with where my football team is playing. That would always be nice.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Right.
Where are you originally from?
So originally, I'm from the Central Texas area. Grew up in between Houston and San Antonio. Professionally, I worked for most of my career in the Austin area, and then I'm now in Kansas City, Missouri.
So you grew up in the Central Texas area. Did you go to college there in Texas?
I did. My degree is in recreation administration from what is now Texas State University.
And that's in San Marcos, right?
Correct.
So for a lot of folks, that's halfway between San Antonio and Austin, right? Ish.
Yes. It was a great place to be. You could decide on Thursday night which city you wanted to go to and be there within 45 minutes.
And what kind of courses or stuff did you take while you're? What are some things, projects, or courses you remember in your time there?
I did a lot of things that were really on the administration side. So I almost describe that program in our department as being a business degree for recreation, as compared to the therapeutic recreation component that many of my classmates were in. So I feel like I had a very kind of classic education with speech, philosophy, business law, a lot of those things that have actually helped me out as an administrator over the years that you wouldn't have told me when I was in school I was going to use just as much as the programming and the outdoor recreation and the leadership and those kinds of things. I think one of the programs that I'm most proud of that we did while I was a student at State, that two of my classmates and I were actually asked to program the dean's reception for the College of Education at homecoming one year. There were 10,000 alumni and their families invited to this event. And one of our projects actually for class was to create the recreation opportunities for that. And that was a really cool thing for me because my dad is also a graduate of the College of Education at Texas State. And I remember going to that event as a kid with him.
Yeah,
So it was a nice full circle moment.
awesome. And then so it's now Texas State University.
Mhm.
Are you still involved with them at all?
I am. I'm actually still involved in the alumni advisory panel for the Department of Health and Human Performance for the four different degree programs in recreation.
Okay, very cool. Do you ever get to go back there and hang out and or whatnot?
Every once in a while, fortunately, we have a strong DMLA program in Texas, so I get to go back and plan visits with that, and I'll reach out to faculty and see what's going on with the university, try to catch a game if I can, depending on the time of year.
Awesome. After you got done with your degree there, kind of you kind of already did a little bit. Well, walk us through your kind of career path and lightly touch on a little bit of what you did with each stop along the way.
Sure. Uh, First, I was very fortunate with my degree path. And that started as a student with getting involved with professional organizations. I was a president of the Association of Recreation Majors at Texas State. I was on the board of directors of the Texas Recreation and Park Society as a student for 2 years as president of the student branch of that association. So those things really helped grow my network at the time that I was also presenting at conferences along with faculty or more seasoned professionals, which were a great start. So that allowed me at the time I was graduating to actually accept a position that was above entry level, straight out of school. My first position was Recreation Division Manager for a community of 60,000 that was a suburb of Austin. And I spent just exactly 2 years there, almost to the day. In that position, I was responsible for 14 annual community events and 15 weeks of summer camp. My largest event was July 4th, which was 35,000 people. So that was a great right off the start opportunity to really dive into a huge event and see how that really works.
Yeah.
Left that city to go to the second city that I worked at as youth services supervisor. And in that role, I had 4 licensed after school sites, a licensed summer site for childcare. I was also responsible for overseeing all athletic facilities and the maintenance division, who had their own supervisor, but I was supervising them because so much of what they did was at facilities I was responsible for.
Yeah.
So spent that time there, great opportunity, a little bit smaller community, about 18 to 20,000, but home or actually sandwiched in between 2 major naval installations. So we did a lot for military families at that time. Really cool thing that I got to do there because of that. We actually took all of the kids in our summer program on a tour of one of the naval stations, and it was the home of the mine warfare training school at the time. So we actually got to take them aboard a minesweeper ship.
Nice.
And give them a tour of that, which was really cool.
Yeah.
The last city that I worked for, I was actually there for almost 5 years as assistant director of Parks and Recreation, about 25,000 folks. And at that point, I was responsible for everything other than the maintenance division. So I had parks, pools, playgrounds, all of it. We were in huge growth. That was the recession of the late 2008, 2009 time period. But for us, that just meant we were growing at 8%, not 22.
Sure.
So we still continue to grow through that. Really thought that's where I would be long term, and that city parks and recreation is what I would do. But I did some consulting work during that time for an administrative element of the Methodist Church, and they owned a retreat center, and I helped them at one point design a job description for their first full-time director.
Yeah.
Thought that's all it would be. A year later, they hadn't found somebody. I went back to do a follow-up meeting with their board chair just to see what we could tweak, what was going on, why this search wasn't working. 2.5 hours later, it became kind of clear that I was probably going to end up taking the job. Ended up spending 6 years there.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, that was a really cool thing that if you had shown me the budget before I went, I probably wouldn't have gone. The agency was relying on donations for 50% of operations annually. And I'm really proud of the fact that 22 months into my tenure there, we were more than breaking even. And by the time I left, we had completed all of the deferred maintenance and we're pouring capital investment back into the property. Because of that, we actually started contracting with another church-owned facility to take over management of their facility and try to do the same thing with them. And I worked with them for about 1.5 years, either as a consultant or then actually as a contracted administrator. And we were doing some really great things there at the time that this opportunity with DeMolay came along. Yeah. So I actually did end up leaving that project kind of midstream to come do what I'm doing now, growing this program.
And so with that, with DeMolay, what was your, before you took the position, what was your background that you had with your organization, or did you?
I did.
Okay.
So DeMolay became for me kind of an outlet during that first city that I was working with right out of college. I kind of knew that they existed, but I didn't know anything about them. And what actually happened was some friends of mine came to me and said, we're going to start a DeMolay chapter for our sons who are just now old enough. You're the parks guy, you're the recreation guy, you know what kids want to do, you're the guy that we see putting together all of these events. We want you to come be part of creating this experience.
Yeah.
From there, so I ended up helping them found that chapter, ended up serving as chairman of their advisory board for a few years, then became the district governor of DeMolay for Central Texas, which was a volunteer position. Was working on the jurisdictional staff, the statewide staff there as well. my friends love to tell people about my background. So when, oh, we need a new director of state athletics, or we need somebody to understand these facility contracts of all of these things we're doing for state conferences. We've heard you've done that. And so just in getting involved in that, I had the opportunity to spend about 13 years or so um, working as a volunteer in the program. And then made the decision in March of 2017 to transition and actually started officially on the professional staff in June. So
Okay. And did that immediately lead you to where you're at now in Kansas City?
yeah, so the position was based in Kansas City. I came into the professional team as the executive director, leading a staff of 9, most of whom are based here in Kansas City. 2 are field based, one in Indianapolis, one in St. Louis. And then I oversee and support the work of 5,000 volunteers in 30 countries.
So I gotta know more about so what kind of stuff do you do? I guess let's tackle it one thing at a time. What kind of stuff does DeMolay do on the ground, boots on the ground? What's the mission and what kind of how they carry that out, and then we'll follow that up with like what you do on a daily basis.
Sure. So DeMolay's mission on the ground is to help young men ages 9 to 21 define and achieve their success. So we do that in a structure that looks a lot like a fraternity. We use a lot of that language. So we meet in chapters. The chapters have officers. There is a ritual to what happens at the chapters. And really the reason that we have ritual is to create identity and also to teach public speaking.
Hmm.
So our guys actually will compete in public speaking competitions as part of what they're doing. They're learning how to create that business agenda, run that business meeting. It's their organization. We often say that our advisors, our adults, are there to be guideposts and guardrails. I describe it that how a chapter accomplishes their goal can look a lot like bumper bowling. The goal is just to make sure that they've got a reachable goal.
Sure.
So within that, there's a merit bar system of things that the guys can work on, which really would feel familiar to anybody in the scouting movement.
Sure.
Instead of using patches, we're using merit bars. So we have merit bars for everything from just attending events regularly to safe driving for a year or scholastics. We really promote your academic health in that regard. Some of our new ones have revolved around technology. We actually have one for health and wellness now, which I'm really proud of. That was being done actually as I was transitioning in, so I can't take the credit for it. I have worked with our team to make it a little bit more attainable and more in the line of establishing long-term health and wellness goals
Hmm.
for our young men who are achieving that. And we're seeing some really great opportunities with that, especially with Gen Z. So they'll do that. There are opportunities for leadership above the chapter level at the state or national level, depending on whether you're in the US or not. And we do have 2 international elected officers, who travel with our executive team and represent the organization. They also get to serve on our board of directors for that year. So they get just an incredible opportunity to see what happens in an international charity.
So and I know because we talked a little bit about this, but so where all so you said you mentioned in and outside the United States. Where are these different chapters?
So we have almost 700 chapters around the world that are directly under DeMolay International. Um, they include chapters in Italy, Liechtenstein, Albania, Romania. We're starting in Bulgaria right now. Japan, we're in Tokyo. We used to have a great program in Japan right after World War II, thanks to a DeMolay chapter that was actually afloat in the naval fleet for about 20-ish years around that time. So we're rebuilding our Japanese program. We've just expanded about 2 years ago into Greece. Now we're expanding into Cyprus. We are in most of the South American countries. And then we have 4 franchise locations, which is really an interesting thing where we have actually turned the program completely over to another organization that we've authorized and we have a licensing agreement with. And those are in Australia, Brazil, Canada, and the Philippines.
Okay.
So we're also getting started in South Africa right now and have some interest in some other countries on the African continent.
Yeah.
So we're in 30 countries at the moment.
Dang, dude. That's the best way I can
It's
describe
tough to
it.
keep up with. It's grown quite a bit, even since I've been here. We were just over about 21, 22 countries when I started 4 years ago. Um, so on average, we'll work with between 4 and 6 new countries a year. And we're also actually, we should have started a year ago this month in Russia, our first chapter in Moscow, but they got delayed by COVID. So
Yeah,
hopefully, as soon as that lifts, we'll be in Russia as well.
sure. So, what kind of stuff? You mentioned briefly a little bit different parts. So, what does your day to day type schedule look like? And I know you mentioned traveling a lot. So, day to day, what kind of stuff do you do? And then long term, over a year, what are you doing?
So I don't think there's much difference in a traditional Parks and Recreation position and what I'm doing now, that every day is different. And I don't think I would want it to be any other way.
Yeah,
I think most of us in the field need that variety, need that difference, need that challenge to stay engaged. And you certainly get that in this position. So my year really kind of divides into two parts. And really for our whole administrative team, my whole executive team here in Kansas City. So we talk about the first 6 months of the year, January to June. We are preparing to host 2 international conferences in June. And we do that every year. We have to do that. This year, we're doing that even in a hybrid format, which we have never done before, not only as an organization, but us as professionals.
yeah,
So there's a lot of learning that's going on with that, for something that we hope we will only do one time. Um, but the first half of the year, we're very in what I call corporate mode. We're looking at that corporate annual meeting where the budget's going to get adopted, where we're going to get new legislation and changes in policy, all of those things that would happen through the course of a year in Parks and Recreation at a council meeting or a commissioners meeting. For us, it happens once a year. So we really have to gear up for that. Once we finish that, we really then switch for the second half of the year into more of the programmatic support role. And that's when we're traveling out to events. A lot of our stuff happens programmatically in the summer since we're dealing with youth.
yeah.
So state conferences, national conferences, they're all in June, July, August for the most part. So we've got our executive volunteer team plus our professional staff on the road supporting those events, providing training and at those opportunities. We still do some of that in the first half of the year. I do a lot of weekends, a lot of fly out on Thursday, Friday, fly back on Sunday or Monday
Yeah.
type scenarios. In fact, I will do that this week for a planning meeting for that international conference. So it looks a lot like a traditional Parks and Recreation executive from that standpoint. I'm going to a lot of partner meetings. I'm going to a lot of program sites. What the program is maybe a little different, but that mentality as an executive is the same.
All right.
I do a lot of lots of phone calls. Lots of folks are wanting to make sure they make the right decisions out on the site level, or hey, how does this play into the bigger picture? So you do a lot of phone support, a lot of Zoom meetings in that regard, and then I support our board meetings quarterly as well.
So, what do you think is your favorite part of the job?
The people, I don't think that's changed. I think for me, it's people that caused me to get into Parks and Recreation. When I discovered this as a major, I was not one of the lucky ones that knew from day one coming in as a freshman at Texas State, this is what I was going to do. I was convinced I was going to get a law degree and go into the military and be a judge advocate. That was the goal since I was in about the 6th grade and saw JAG on TV. Um, it really changed for me working at a summer camp, not wanting to go back home and just spend the summer doing nothing. I was hired at a great summer camp that I spent all 4 summers at in school. Actually did 2 of my 3 internships there. Was a great opportunity for that. They were the ones that told me that Texas State even had the program. So I think for me, it's people. It's about seeing that light in somebody's eyes when they've accomplished something they didn't know that they could do. It's about seeing somebody achieve that success that they thought was out of reach. I've learned through my career and times I've been responsible for facilities, I don't want buildings to be what I focus on. I need to be focused on people. I thrive on that energy.
Mhm.
I perform better when I'm in that environment. And so there was a lot of learning of myself over my career about knowing that I'm a front of house guy. I'm the guy that has no problem being in front of the microphone. I can be behind the scenes and doing that. That's great. But I have no problems, stepping up to that microphone and being that voice, being that cheerleader for others. So I had to look. I had to look for a position that was going to let me do that, and I'm really just fortunate. I get to do that with an organization that I developed a passion for, never thinking that I was going to be a professional on this team.
Sure. What, so to kind of contrast that, what are some of the challenges that you faced? Whether that's something you have to deal with a lot or rarely, but what are some of the challenges you face in your position that you know
People,
that are going to come and hit you from side to
yeah,
side?
people are why we do it, but people are the challenge as well. We are an organization, like many parks and recreation agencies, that our events would not happen, our programs would not happen without volunteers. I have 9 professionals on this team. 2 of them are part-time. Some of that is by choice in my philosophy of how we're going to grow and how we're going to do things, that we're using part-time positions instead of full-time, and that's a conscious decision we've made. But we rely on our 5,000 volunteers around the world to actually conduct this program, and they have tremendous latitude within our framework of what they're going to do. So you have people you have to rely on, you have people that you trust, you give them all the training, all of the support, all of the backing that you can give them. But at the end of the day, you can't fire them. If somebody makes a choice that maybe doesn't meet up to your standards or those things, you can ask them not to be a volunteer anymore, but you don't have those same levels of opportunity that you have with a professional staff member. I can't take a volunteer and put them through, a training class or something like that, where you and I would be familiar with, hey, I'm going to make sure you go to a conference.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily do that. With our volunteers. So we have to provide as much training and support as we can in what that looks like. It also means that for us as professionals, we have to do that on our volunteer schedule. So I do a lot of evening trainings. I do a lot of weekend trainings. My job ends up being 24/7 in a lot of ways because of the number of zip codes and just where our folks are.
Sure. Yeah.
So you have to be very comfortable in a lot of ways. You have to be very comfortable in not only your own skills and what you've learned and how prepared that you've become at your university and in your previous occupation. You have to be able to compartmentalize that, hey, that volunteer is not always going to make a perfect decision because they don't have the training I have.
Right.
But how can I help them make a better decision next time? And you just have to stay positive through all of that, which can sometimes be the challenge.
I had a buddy one time, buddy slash mentor one time. His mantra was assume noble intent,
Mm-hmm.
and so these people want to make good decisions and they want to do the right thing, and just because people make mistakes,
Right.
but they're doing it for the right reasons, or they have the heart in the right place most of the time.
Right. And that's absolutely what we see. When I was a volunteer in this organization, to volunteer the way that I wanted to cost me a couple of $1,000s a year. And so I have to keep that in mind, that some of my volunteers, many of them actually are contributing not only time and talent, but they have significant treasure invested in this program as well, just to participate. And many of them are financial donors on top of that as well.
Yeah.
So they are absolutely here for the right reasons. And it's just about how, and we focus on this a lot, how do we help them be the mentor they want to be and the mentor that our young men deserve and expect? And so we spend a lot of time focusing on that, just to help them make those decisions and understand some of those things that you and I got in classrooms, or your students are getting in classrooms now, that they didn't have the benefit of.
Yeah. So, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but before I let you go, for somebody that's wanting to kind of look, if they're thinking about, oh, this sounds like a great career path, or some of the things that Mr. Moore has done seem kind of cool. What are some pieces of advice for students or young professionals that are looking at a similar career path? What kind of things would you tell them to do or think about, or, along those lines?
I think the best piece of advice that I ever got came while I was a college student. Robert Armistead, who is a living legend within NRPA, is from Texas. Robert looked at me at a student branch retreat in Texas, and he said, look, don't silo yourself. You think you're a programmer, you're doing all this great stuff in summer camp, go get some aquatics experience before you get out of school. And I did that. I did an internship with the city of San Marcos. As part of that, we renovated their city swimming pool that year. I had no idea that almost everywhere else I went, I was going to end up managing pools. And it was great that I understood pool chemistry, but what was even better was I understood the financial implications of that pool on my overall budget later.
Right.
So the biggest thing that I can say is don't turn off to an opportunity. Don't think that I'm only an aquatics person, I'm only an athletics person, I'm only a recreation person, a programmer. Parks and recreation, the impact that we can make as an industry is more than parks, pools, and playgrounds. And the skills that we get in these programs really allow you to do almost anything you want to do. And just take those opportunities, challenge yourself, take that leap of faith. A couple of times in my career, I went to agencies, and after I got there, it was like, oh, I'm not so sure about this. Those all ended up being tremendous learning opportunities, and every one of them helped me be where I am. And every one of those has something that I lean back on now. Yeah. So take every opportunity that you can get. Don't think that you're just one type of professional. A parks and recreation professional is a very diverse professional by training.
So I said that was the last question. I actually got one more. And this is my favorite question to ask, actually, is if you weren't doing what you're doing now and you could pick any job in the world, what would be your dream job?
That's a question I actually ask myself a lot. And I encourage every professional to do that anytime you're looking at a career, at even a level change in your career. Maybe it's time to promote. Have that idea of what do you think is next for you? What ignites your passion? I can honestly tell you that in the 4 years I've been here, I haven't been able to find that answer. Every other agency that I've been at, I've been able to go in and say, especially as a director, and say, okay, to accomplish what we're thinking, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, we should have this done. This agency, I have not been able to do that. I haven't been able to lock that down because we're getting just such incredible opportunities as an organization to grow, to expand, to continue to do that. So I really don't know as far as a specific position. What I do know about myself is whatever position that I do transition to next, it's got to be people-based, and it's got to be about supporting and mentoring people. I think the opportunities I had in TRAPS and NRPA led to that, because at some level I realized I started thinking about that early in my career, that my passion was about providing experience for people. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't tied down to venues to do that. So there's some great organizations that are out there that are doing similar work to what I am, that, may be opportunities for me somewhere down the road. But for the first time really in my career, I can say with true conviction, this is where I'm supposed to be right now, and I don't have an ending date on that.
Cool. That's a good feeling, right?
It is. It's a really good feeling.
Yeah. Well, Christian, thank you so much for doing this for me. I sincerely appreciate it, number one. But the other part is, it's always good, catching up with some folks that, we met at NRPA. I don't want to think about how long ago that was, but
yeah, I did a conference on Saturday with DeMolay Bat, who we met about the same time in NRPA, and he and I did talk about how long that was ago, and I don't want to think about it.
Well, thank you so much. Enjoy your day, and let me know if I can do anything for you.
Absolutely, thank you, and to all of your students, just best of luck, and absorb everything you can, because there's going to be some random lesson one day in class that you won't know until 10 years later you needed it.
Right? Like maybe this interview when they watch it.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right, Christian, have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.